Thanks for joining in today for our educational webinar covering why you should price with margin versus markup. I'm Chris Arredondo, co-founder and VP of pretty much everything customer here at Cargo Chief. Let's see here, just a few housekeeping things before we kick off. I would like to encourage you to share any questions or comments that you might have, or maybe even any experiences regarding today's topic. So please enter those in the chat by clicking the chat button and typing in your thoughts. We'll get to those towards the end of the webinar. It might look a little different this time than this screenshot shows here, but there is a little chat box. It might even say Q&A there. We'll also be recording this session, and I'll also send out that link to everyone here today. So if you'd like to share that with your team or watch it again, please feel free to do so. Let's see here. All right, so today we'll be going over a hot topic that seems to have been more pressing, especially as markets swing and companies are striving to get back to that realistic forecasting, and that is pricing with margin over markup to be profitable. We'll also cover what the difference is between markup and margin, and 3 reasons why and when you should price with margin. Number 1, to win more opportunities, 2, to forecast profitability, and 3, to scale and grow. If we have time towards the end, then I'll also give you a quick preview on how other companies and brokerages are using our pricing tool in C4, if anyone wants to stick around for that. Excuse me, getting over a little cold here, so just bear with me. So a little bit more about what we do is provide practical, unique, and current data to help logistics teams like yourselves to make better business decisions. The 2 main problems we really solve for are capacity and rating. Related to today's topic, with rating, we focus on providing information that you can understand quickly to help take that guesswork out of quoting and buying, so you don't have to have an economics degree to make your next bid. We see that with some of the pricing tools that are out there. A lot of it's delayed and you're still having to make that educated guess. So we step in to help reduce that risk of guessing so you don't end upside down on the load and, of course, end on a profit. Now, everyone has this data like load transactions. Oops, something's going on with my PowerPoint over here. So everyone has this data like load transactions, what you've ran a lane for in the past, and what your regular carriers typically run lanes for. Where that's somewhat more of tribal knowledge and not very easy to access or share. What you do with that information depends on whether you price with margin or markup, and it's critical when you're doing one or the other. So let's talk about the difference here. There we go. Let's assume you have regional freight that might be between, let's just say 100 and 300 miles. This can be for future business or a spot quote. You'll often already know your cost here, since these lanes don't swing as much as those longer haul shipments. Assume your company's profit margin goal is maybe 13% to cover costs and keep growing. Now it's important to remember that that's as a whole, as a company, and not per load. So in this example, assuming we're looking at a van lane from Houston to San Antonio, where I can lay out a cost pretty much any day of the week for $500, give or take $50 if it's on short notice. If I'm pricing with markup, and typically what I'll just say is, hey, let's just throw an extra $125 on it. That's a pretty common phrase on the short haul shipments that you hear throughout the day, and you're still making money on that load. So in this case, I found my markup by using the rate I'm charging my customer, or the price to shipper here, $625, minus what I'm expecting to pay the carrier, or my cost to the carrier, $500, divided by the cost to the carrier of $500. All in all, together, I'm looking at 25% and $125 in profit on this load, which sounds pretty good. So as the haul increases, and I still have the same structure of adding an extra X dollars, let's take the example of a haul twice as long. In this case, Houston to Birmingham. Where we're looking at maybe $1,400 to the carrier and add an extra $250 to my cost, where it comes in as, hey, just add $250. As a result, I'm charging $1,650 to the customer. Seems normal for a long haul shipment to have cushion there just in case there's a fall off. In this example, I'm using the same formula to find that markup of price minus cost divided by cost, leaving me just under 18% markup. And I'm still making 250 bucks, still pretty good since it is higher than the profit I made on that San Antonio load. So here's the difference. Let's look at the two hauls side by side after calculating out margin. Using a similar formula, a little different, but dividing by the price instead of cost, as you can see here of 625. The other example, I was dividing by my cost. When we look at the example, or I guess the top example here, it tells us that if we just said, hey, just add 15% up there, added on to the cost, then our margin would have actually been 13% after I calculate this. So you can quickly see that difference right here. When we look at the example of what actually happened in that past example of Houston to San Antonio, when we said to just add 125 bucks to the top, being 500 to the carrier, 625 to the shipper, I've already lost 5% from my bottom line before the load even picked up, before it's even dispatched, before it's even in my TMS. I've already lost out on profits there because I didn't buy with margin. Although the margin is higher than my goal of 13, when I'm looking at 20% here, there was a lot of money left on the table when negotiating with the carrier. Just assume if I kept the same rate of 625 to the customer, but went to the carrier with 469 instead of $500, I would have gained an additional 31 bucks per load. Over 100 loads, that means I lost out on 3,100 bucks just by using the wrong pricing strategy. You can see bigger impacts on those longer haul shipments like Houston to Birmingham, where almost 3% of my expected profit disappears before that quote is even looked at from your customer. When we look at 18 minus 15, we've got roughly 3%. If I kept the same customer rate and I bought the carrier at 17.8, I would have had an extra, in this case, $44 per load. So you can quickly see the difference between the short hauls and your long hauls and why it's important to focus on your margin per load as well. Over 100 loads a month, that meant I lost out on 4,400 bucks. If I was quoting with margin, I wouldn't have. So in this case, you're often giving away too much money of what's left to negotiate. This is probably the most common mistake that a lot of brokerages make while trying to communicate with their teams, maybe as an ops manager, or even as you're on the phone negotiating in increments of 25 or 50 bucks, where in these examples, we can clearly see how big of an impact that increment makes to your bottom line. Carrier buys aren't the only thing affected. So if you think about this too, also the customer side. Imagine if you were able to buy better on the carrier side just because you bought with margin. In a few of these examples here, that means your initial bids and quotes to your customers would have more room to adjust up or down and win before your competitors come in and undercut. After the webinar, I'll send out some relevant formulas in this review so you can kind of go back, calculate, and become a little bit more familiar with how margin and markup impacts your business. Now that we know kind of the difference between the two types of pricing and have seen some common examples, a big question is, if I price with margin, how would that win me more opportunities? I think that's, you know, a big understanding whenever you're going through your day-to-day is to really, you know, think about that different point of, am I pricing with markup? Am I pricing with margin? So this is one of the most important parts, because after all, you can't grow unless you're winning more freight. And it's important to understand that winning those more opportunities, it's not biased towards just the sell side when you're quoting or bidding on freight, but also on the buy side when you're negotiating with carriers. When we think about short hauls in that example earlier, and maybe even easy lanes, when there's less risk, faster transit times, adding that extra $150 becomes a lot more common because it's easy to do. It's just, hey, just add this 150 and just get it over with and move the load. But it often leaves you missing out on those opportunities. The inverse, if you're not considering what's going into your rates and quoting or pricing with zeros and fives, that's more often than not going to put you out of the market when compared to your competitors. So this is typically when larger brokers come into play. We've all heard about Uber, Convoy, TQL, CH Robinson, all those guys with big tech spends. All of them have that technology that does those quoting calculations for them, where they're winning the freight or bid by not pricing on fives or zeros, but with margin that will bring their price to shipper at 568, for example, undercutting every single other bid at 575. Doesn't even give you a chance. At this point, they're passing that margin difference back to the carrier while knowing what their absolute max buy is. Luckily, I learned a lot of these tactics when I started my career at C.H. Robinson and even through XPO. So I was able to grow, after that, a former brokerage that I ran from 11% to 18% just by pricing with margin, while also increasing that revenue and winning those more opportunities. Another reason of why is maybe because you're doing just that, pricing in increments of 50 or $100, not leaving room to do the opposite when you're finding carriers that meet your cost points. If you're negotiating with a carrier in buckets of $100, that starts to add up really fast and impact your margins, like we saw in our examples earlier, where it's very incremental, but it definitely has an impact over the long run when you divide it by or multiply it by all of your loads, your load count per month, per year, whatever it is. So to that, you should really always ask that question of why not have my max buy set at an extra $73 instead of $100 ending in zeros or fives before you go and give the farm away. So some things I've done before, excuse me, some things I've done before to help price and win more opportunities regarding increments is pitching volume to carriers or spending that time to develop relationships to hone in on that price point. In addition, I've always either had an alternative website that cross-calculated for me or even a calculator to cross-check what my max buy should be, just using those formulas that I used earlier. Let me see if I can hop into, so I'm going to hop into a tool called C4 just to kind of give you an example of how this would look like as you're working with margins, reaching out to carriers and pricing differently and things like that. So whether it's a website that you use, your TMS or a calculator, it's really important to kind of understand where these differences are in percentages. So while negotiating, 9 times out of 10, the carrier will counter and come down. It's almost guaranteed that they're going to counter. Every time you reach out to a carrier, they're going to do that. The key is the closer you are to their number, the more likely that carrier will take your freight, even in today's market. I've heard a lot of brokerages that use our tool that say, as they're reaching out to carriers, they're using these different strategies to get closer to their number that ties in that margin percentage whenever they're looking at kind of their goals and things. So let's say I click on this carrier here. We'll just pick Fifth Wheel Logistics here. Let's say I click on them. And as I'm calling through, I pitch a rate of $1,400 first to set a floor. The carrier might tell me, and maybe they're going to say $1,500, but when I know I've only got $1,650 in the load, so it's not leaving too much room for error there, just in case there is a fall off or whatever it could be, 2 days of tracking and whatnot. So instead of hanging up, it's extremely important to know what your margin goal is, not again just by company, but really per load. To find out what your absolute max buy is. Sometimes that's even by customer. If you drilled in that far, maybe not per se like per company, but a lot of times you'll have like a pipe customer or a lumber customer who's got tighter margins, or even produce too. So it's important to understand where that margin should be. So we'll see if I can do this here. So I'm gonna just kind of show you how our cross calculator works here. If my goal is 13%, I think in an earlier example that we used, my max buy for, I think my customer rate might have been 1625. Nope, I think it was 1650. Yeah, so I think in that Houston and Birmingham example, my max buy was 1650, or my customer rate goal of 13. My max buy is actually 1436 and not 1450. Where that $50 increment is often pitched first by just out of speed, trying to go and book the load and move on. A lot of times if that carrier agrees to 1450, I've just left money on the table and it's already eating into my profits. So using a calculator or a tool like we have here in C4, when I set my customer rate and margin of 13, I can easily see what my max buy should be when I'm reaching out to new carriers. When I use increments again in the right place, so like in this example, if I went in and reached to this carrier, we'll just say fifth wheel logistics again. If I went in, going in first with 1,400 bucks, and I countered because they're guaranteed going to counter. If I came back again with 1425 instead of 1450, so a smaller bucket, it still gives me room to negotiate up to my max buy. After another likely counter from that carrier of 1450, one tactic I've used to say is, hey, I don't quite have that much in this one, but I can do up to 1436 all in if that works for you. Again, you always want to sound like a human and not just a broker trying to rush off the phone. Carriers really, really appreciate that relationship, because it's not, when you think about load board carriers, they're always rush. No, I've got 20 carriers, 20 brokers calling me today, and it's kind of trying to move fast. But it's important that you have your goals and your margins set ahead of you. So I'm going to switch back here. Let's see here. If I can come back. All right. So it might seem like might seem hard to do. Like, Chris, what are you talking about? I can't do this. Carriers won't let me do this. It might seem like there are no carriers that will do that if you've never tried that tactic. But if you think about the match and the high fit your load has for those carriers, they're unlikely to say no to that extra 14 bucks. If you were able to inch up your margins an extra $14, you're able to buy and quote with margin over 200 loads a month. That'd bring up to an extra $2,800 in that example every month, with that money just sitting right there in front of you. Just got to take the time and the effort to try that tactic out. So after using those tactics and understanding how margin and markup works in practice, you should be able to forecast your profits much better. Being able to do this effectively and accurately gives you the chance to grow appropriately and not too fast, where you might end up top heavy towards one customer or another. If you think about just sitting in your office or just emails going back and forth, if you think about how many times a day the phrase of, hey, I just added an extra 15%, or just throw another 150 on top of it. If you think about how many times that was mentioned, then you can quickly add up and just easily see how many times money is left on the table. Thinking back to when I ran a brokerage office, we shipped maybe 50 loads a day in our office, where markup was used, markup was used not just on the buy side for carriers, but also to the sell side. Albeit the shift from markup to margin isn't an overnight thing. Over 6 months, we were able to increase margins by 7% from 11 to 18, while increasing that revenue by 40,000 a month with the same number of customers. It was all right there for me. We just needed to put the strategy in place. To that point, also, if you're projecting what you're shooting for next month or next quarter, and you're only adding markup, our examples of long haul and short hauls start to add high risk, and those projections all of a sudden become unrealistic, because you can't really shoot and aim for something that's going to actually make you profitable. So, let's see here. In this graph, if we look at 200 loads a month here, and we follow the blue line, and this is going to be your profit with markup on the blue line. Excuse me. I'm thinking about each load you sold to the shipper was $1,380 in our markup example, and each load you said, hey, let's just add that 15%, ending in $180 profit per load. You end up as $1,200 as your cost, right? So if you follow the green line here, and you had margined with 15%, thinking about on both sides of the dime with getting 15% on the carrier side and 15% on the sell, that puts your carrier cost just under $1,200 at $1,190, and my sell just above 14 at $1,412. And that gives you overall an additional, if you multiply it out, $8,400 a month when we're looking at this difference here. And over 200 loads a month, that's easily $100,000 extra annually, just by pricing with margin over markup. The money is there, just have to have the right strategy. With those new profits, the possibilities are limitless, I guess. You could maybe hire an additional employee to drive sales, or even look into other software to become a little bit more tech advanced to help position yourself for that change and be able to compete a little bit more. So This leads into scaling and growing quite well. Without adding on more customers, you can quickly find yourself in the position where all of a sudden things are clicking. And thinking back to that last graph, pricing with margin led you to over $100,000 annually to do a lot of things with. So I'm not a life coach or anything. Excuse me, I'm not a life coach or anything, but I feel you should strive to be the best you, best broker, and put 110% in everything you do. We know the job is, it's all about money, but whenever you start to have that sense of accomplishment, it really starts to bleed into your life, I guess, and it starts to be a little bit more positive, where you're not losing hand over fist on different things. So to that point, also, once that doubt starts to bleed into your daily tasks, then you might have already been persuaded in a different direction and not be willing to put forth that effort. Oh, I don't think I was sharing that next screen there. Again, pricing and quoting in a different way doesn't happen overnight, but winning more opportunities and forecasting accurately will surely get your business to the point of growth. So again, growth, though, is an outcome of what strategies and tactics you use as you're scaling your business. So this is a good point to start thinking about those tools, what you can do with those extra profits to help even drive those even higher. Find ways to save time, whether it's tracking, writing notes down, or maybe carrier development or whatever it is. So another thing, while you're scaling, it's really important that that doesn't mean to do the most tedious tasks over and over and just add on more work. It's really about finding what you excel at, how to take that additional profit you found, put the right people into place. So a good way to look at this is maybe just kind of some things that I've done is write down all the tasks that takes up more than 15 minutes of your time every day. Write them all down, circle the top 3 that you love to do, focus on those, and try to delegate out the rest if you can. In this example, if pricing is your thing and you're like, wow, there's a lot of information, then run with it and put strategies and practices in place for your team to excel. If it sells, then don't forget to price with margin to have the best outcome. It's pretty much it. So before we conclude here, it looks like there are a few questions. Let me see what we've got. So one question is, how do I know if my profits will increase by pricing with margin? So again, how do I know if my profits will increase by pricing with margin? So it actually depends on if you're tracking your starting point or not. If we look back at our example in the Hall differences, I can probably just go up here. Oh, went too far. If we look back here, chances are, if you broke all that down in your business day to day, or even today, whether that's a lane report or by revenue report, and you look at all of your costs and shipper charges in the last 30 days, you'll quickly find at least 25% or maybe even half of those transactions end in zeros or fives. Almost every single one of those transactions are areas to improve on. So tally it all up, whether in Excel or your TMS, and add in your target margin. And you can easily see that increase right in front of you once you cross-calculate that out through all of your transactions every day. It looks like someone has another question. A little confused on the difference. So the difference between margin and markup. So here, just looking at the formula not this formula. Let's go back to the markup formula. Let's just use this one as an example. The markup is what's often thrown out there. So you could probably step into any brokerage office and you'll hear the phrase, hey, just add an extra $100. Very, very, very common. It's okay to do sometimes if you think about like partials or maybe LTLs or something like that, but related to full truckload, it's really important that you're not projecting on markup, that you're projecting on margin, because markup is going to end up leaving you in a hole, like we look here, where I've lost money when I'm projecting to make money. So the difference there is really focus on that margin part. And if I didn't clear that up, but my contact information will be down here in the bottom. Let me go back to that slide. So if you like a little bit more clarification, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email and we can talk about that. So I have another question. How long does it take to do this? My team is booking over 15 loads a day. And sometimes we just need to get the load moved and don't have time to nickel and dime. Um, so this comes back to the question of earlier when I was saying, why not just offer that $73 instead of $100 when you're going in first? Don't just give the farm away. Carriers are investing as much time as you are fielding calls, probably more, and want to go with what fits best for them to reduce their risk just as well as you do. Giving in that whole $100 didn't even give you the chance to pitch that $73. When I did this, it didn't happen overnight, but every single time you quote and bid on new freight, every load that is booked gives you the opportunity to start to see that increase. It might take a few weeks before reps fully understand and start adapting it. Might be some resistance, but they honestly won't be complaining when they're taking home a lot more money, and they feel that sense of accomplishment every time they hang up the phone. And to that point, also, I would maybe start small. Maybe don't go from 11 to 18 in your next month, but so don't shoot for the moon, but maybe find where you're at today. It's important to benchmark where you are. Where you want to be month over month to really hit that goal. If you're shooting for a 7% increase, then it's really important to know where you're at today too. Will, I think you might have had a question here. So the difference is adding your gross percentage to carrier costs versus reducing carrier costs to protect your margin. Yes. So in a way, it's adding gross percentage. So adding your margin to the carrier costs versus just saying, going back and saying, hey, I'm cutting your rate by 25, $100. So it's really important that you focus on where that max buy needs to be. And again, if you have want any more clarification, we can talk later. So it doesn't look like there's any other questions here. If there are any other topics you'd like to hear about, feel free to fill out the form we send along with today's recording, and we can cover that in the future, or that you'd like to hear us cover in the future. And again, if anyone wants to stick around to get a quick preview on how our pricing tool works, feel free to stick around for another give or take 5 minutes or so. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining in today. Hopefully you've seen a few reasons why pricing with margin over markup is critical to your business. And again, for more information on Cargo Chief, what we do, you can visit our website, schedule a demo. I think we even have a quick video up there on our site. Or feel free to reach me directly. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn for more webinars and updates. So again, for those who want to stick around, we'll kick off here in a few seconds. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. I think, Jeremy, you might have a question here. It's probably a little bit more related to C4, so I can certainly answer that here after this. Let's see what we've got. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just get right into C4. We've actually did a launch not too long ago. I think it was about 2 weeks ago on our pricing tool over here. So if you'd like to see this a little bit more, then I'll certainly show you and start now. But to answer Jeremy's question, do we have our own network of carriers? Yes. No. Well, kind of. So we're tied into the FMCSA. We have access to over 500,000 carriers just there, but kind of like how we list carriers out in C4 is driven by C4 users, so mostly brokerages. So that's kind of how the capacity and lanes and frequency and all that information is built in. So just to look at our rating tool here, I'll just take a lane like Atlanta to Lakeland. I can type in that search up here, just like I did, or I can just do a quick click right there as well. So what we're going to show you here is two things. So the current rates and the recent transactions. I think, what I mentioned earlier in the webinar, if those of you who were here back then, a lot of the rating tools out there are delayed, maybe by 7 or 14 days, even after it's delivered. Which is pretty problematic when you're thinking about things like hurricanes. I think there was a random hurricane that hit Florida just recently that not a lot of people knew was actually going to come to fruition. So when you're thinking about, the different lanes and things and how much of an impact something is yesterday or the day before, there aren't really many tools out there that tell you, hey, this is what's happening. This is what the current rate is going to be. So that's kind of what we have here. So if we look at like Atlanta to Lakeland, we have two tools here, current rates that will indicate that fluctuation and that swing in the market, as well as recent transactions to give you an idea of where is that rate actually coming. So how we get this information is from TMS's, factoring companies, and C4 users. So it's meant for real brokers, data coming from real brokers paying real carriers, where it's not skewed by CH or TQL or XPO or some of the larger guys, where your other tools out there might have a little bit more of a skew in one direction, low or high. And the other thing too is that there a lot of times those the ranges that they give are really wide. I think one example is like Philadelphia to LA, where I would see one that was like $1,400 swing. How am I supposed to quote and win with something like that? So kind of what we do here is one, we'll show you that tighter range, as well as give you access to recent transactions. So when I click that expand button, I can actually see the actual transaction that occurred. When I look at a lane, we might not have as much data coming in for this one, but it looks like our most recent one and relevant was maybe this guy right here, picked up on the 5th. And that's another thing too, is that in our TMSs, when we're connected by API, if a broker books a load at 10 a.m., 5 minutes later, you'll be able to see that transaction here because we look at the pickup date and not the delivery date. So if we know that this load picked up on the 5th, we can actually see the breakdown of that transaction actually happening. So we have a lot more confidence in what rate this lane is actually running for. So I take that 1550. My customer says like, hey, do you have, or can you do this for 16? Maybe it's a little bit skinny on the margins, but at least you have confidence that yes, you can certainly cover that for that lane. We could probably look at another here just to give you a little bit more color. Maybe Dallas to Miami. Run a search here, and we get similar results as far as the current rates, recent transactions. The recent transactions will be determined based on my deadhead limits over here. So certainly through a lot of lanes, different lanes, you'll have more transactions than others. So I think we're bringing in roughly 15 to 20,000 loads a week, so that are actually here in the recent transactions. We have different levels of equipment. I think even if I go to flatbed, probably have something here. Flatbeds, at least we'll have a rate. So sometimes you'll have a better rate than what you'll see in the other tools. So just kind of a quick sneak peek here. We do have a 14-day trial. So if you'd like to maybe try out our pricing tool or get into the carriers, projects, reports, scorecards, things like that, then you can definitely start a trial. I guess to answer any questions, it's all I'm going to get into as far as this pricing tool. Did anyone else have any questions? I think a common one that I get is, hey, can you run another lane? So we can maybe go to like Dallas to Atlanta. If there's a lane that you want me to run real fast, certainly just put it into the chat and just have your origin, destination, and your trailer type, and I'll give it a quick run here. So like in this lane, we've got a little bit more recent transaction data. So like Dallas to Atlanta, we've got shipments that I think I saw the 9th somewhere here. There we go. There's a 9th. Going up to Massachusetts, a little bit different. But you can kind of get an idea of what that market's running for. So at least you have better confidence on what you're actually going to price with, or even buy carriers at. No, so there was a question, are rates based on brokers reaching out to carriers? No, it's actual transactions that have occurred. So we get all this load data and the transaction data from your TMS, or you send us a CSV or whatever it is. And all that information goes into our kind of like our models or algorithms and things like that. And that'll spit out a different rate here. Most of our customers, I'd say all of them, are brokerages. So there's, as far as C4 goes as a whole, there are some new brokers that have just started trying to build out their carrier base, focus on carrier development first. So that's a good piece for them as far as capacity solutions, where you get into mid-sized brokers and up to, I don't know, maybe 300 million or size of a broker. So we have kind of a range of all types of brokers. There's different, as far as C4 goes, there's different features that fit a different rep. So carrier rep features, customer rep features, and pricing team features as well. So it's kind of the whole swing of brokers that we use C4, I guess. I can just run another lane here. I'll just take, oh, I don't know if I have any down there. Just click this, see what happens. So I guess in this case, Philly to Chino, looks like these are at the end of the month, so we probably don't have much recent transaction data here. But you do kind of have like a current rate. I think I looked at this yesterday and it actually showed like 3,300. The reason why it changed is because we're looking at tomorrow of a Friday. So if we're getting closer to the end of the week, capacity starts to dry up. And we're predicting that rate is going to be a little bit higher based on the transactions that we've had in the past. So you will see that difference. I mean, we could probably even look at like Monday and maybe see a different rate. A lot of times you will, just depends on that lane density. Yeah, so here it already dropped down an extra $600 pretty much, because we're forecasting that on Monday, you're gonna have a lot better chances of getting capacity than you will tomorrow, less than 24 hours. So you can use these different types of tools and ways to look at freight and pricing to actually go and bid a little bit better. We've had some customers that will just, I'll just take Atlanta to Lakeland. They've told us, hey, carriers are killing us. They're charging us $5 a mile, and their customers might not necessarily believe them. So what we've had some customers do is just, hey, take a screenshot of this, the real pricing per mile, and say like, this is actually what's happening. And they have a little bit more trust from their customers, where, you know, even though these aren't their transactions, they might be, but just as a market as a whole, they're able to kind of, you know, push that education a little bit further, not just in their brokerage. So I don't have anything else. I'll just conclude here. And Amy, I do see your question there, so we will reach out to you here after this. That's pretty much it, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed and learned something today. Again, feel free to reach out, and I'll send this presentation, a link to the recording, and as well as a quick survey. If you want to hear more topics, maybe pricing, margin, or carriers, or whatever it is, I'll send that out, and you can just add your input, and maybe we can get to it in our upcoming webinars. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.